Geometry Dash platformer mode has been out for around 6 months now. During this time, the community has made some incredible levels, including a 3D map, boss rushes such as Grand Arena Showdown, and creative masterpieces such as Zip Dash. At the same time, a group of players have been raising the skill ceiling of platformer mode. They've conquered challenge after challenge, and this is the 6-month history of the top players of platformer mode. In the early days of 2.2, the physics were completely different to what they are nowadays. Every game mode felt like it was slipping on ice all the time, even in the air, making precise lineups and jumps a tough challenge. This meant the first 3 demons, Jetlag, I Wanna Be the Guy, and the Tower 22 were much harder than they are nowadays. Of these 3, the hardest by far was Tower 22. It had a few setups where it was necessary to jump in curved-like motions to thread the needle between some spikes. Then in Checkpoint 2, it has an infinite jump section that requires navigating around tons of blue rotating fireballs and a tight spike corridor. The last checkpoint is the shortest, but also the most brutal. It requires landing on the corner of mini blocks to avoid some mini spikes, while also taking into account the slippery physics of the game. With all of them using their skill from the Celeste community, creating and verifying this level, it was clear they were ahead of mostly everyone else. But the Tower 22 was not the only hard platformer level, it was the only one officially rated. In fact, there was an entire list of unrated levels that players could try to beat, and one player over the course of 1 to 2 months beat every single one of them. Their name was Tired, who had previously beaten Floating Outskirts, a platforming minigame that was made before platformer mode was officially added to the game. Among these levels, he's beaten Yasan 2, a level that features moving platforms that do not carry the player, meaning that Tired had to keep tapping left while simultaneously performing precise jumps. Promethean 2, a difficult challenge with a tight click pattern in the middle, and Sunken Pier, a UFO level where he had to outrun spikes chasing him, and so much more. At this point, Tired was the #1 list grinder and had officially beaten the hardest levels the game had to offer. It seemed no one could come close, no one except Aibyou, who was the first victor of Tower of Infinity, a top 10 at the time, and was working his way up from the bottom of the list. During this time, a new unverified or unbeaten top 1, the Abyss, came out, and it was a grueling marathon featuring 7 layers. The first 3 layers are filled to the brim with precise robot spike jumps. The 4th layer, the thermal vent, has a low gravity gimmick where the player has to collect 2 hearts to open a door. The 5th layer has some ball gameplay, including this finicky timing. The 6th layer is split into 2 parts, the castle, which is full of ball and spider lineups, and 4 very precise UFO clicks. Following that up was the most brutal part of the level, the second checkpoint of the second half of layer 6. These robot jumps were harder than anything that was seen before, including one where a regrab was required, which meant in the middle of a jump the right or left key was released and then quickly pressed again. Layer 7, while easier than the previous one, does not ease off entirely. This layer has more precise gameplay while being almost pitch black. This level was an open verification, meaning that instead of having one dedicated player, multiple people could try their hand at verifying or proving that the level was possible. Would it be Tired, the person who cleared the entire list, or Aibyou, who was closing the gap near the top? Instead, Mikoshii, someone who had cleared the top 3 level, Fly the Far Away, was ultimately the verifier. And sure enough, after the grind, Mikoshii was able to beat it. However, the aforementioned 3 players, Tired, Aibyou, and Olive, also beat the Abyss. And only 2 days after Abyss was officially verified, and after playing catch up from the bottom of the list, Aibyou finally surpassed Tired in completions. It was time for Aibyou to show everyone what he could do. During this period, there are a few other players I haven't mentioned, such as Ninz, Lapla, and Autumn, that showed incredible skill such as beating Taro 22, I Wanna Be the Guy, or Scarlet Basement in incredibly fast times, and have an argument of being at the top of the leaderboards if they grinded more, but due to lack of data points or honorable mentions here. During the following months, new physics updates removed slippery physics, allowing for players to more easily perform precise lineups and jumps. Alongside this change, coyote frame jumps were also introduced, meaning it was now possible to jump 1/20th of a second after walking off a platform. These changes made levels such as Impossible Boy, a previously unverified level, significantly easier. Impossible Boy included a decent number of directional regrabs, although easier than the ones found in Abyss, and long jumps that were immediately followed up by stopping right before running into spikes. And after 4,000 to 5,000 attempts, Aibyou verified this top 5 to 10 level. Eventually, a new top 1 came around that exploited the new stiff physics even more. In Smelvin Tea House, there were several jumps where the robot had to land on the corner of a mini block that had a mini spike on top of it. But nonetheless, Aibyou and Tired definitely had the skill to do it. Surprisingly, neither of them were the first victor of the level. Instead, it was someone who had been climbing up the ladder of the most difficult levels in the past few weeks, and also managed to beat Abyss before the other two players. Their name was Muzza. At the same time, many players felt that Smelvin Tea House was not the true top 1. Instead, there was a Donkey Kong Country inspired level, Bramble Scramble, that was argued to be much harder. Bramble also had a series of jumps where you had to land right next to a mini spike, but this time there were much more of them, where it wasn't possible to hug the mini block underneath for an easier lineup. It also featured a grueling UFO section where you had to constantly tap in the right rhythm, and this UFO click that seems near frame perfect in the middle of a checkpoint. In the end, it was definitely decided that Bramble was harder, and Crerro, the creator and verifier of this level, was suddenly a contender for the #1 player. However, Crerro had less completions in total than either Aibyou or Muzza at this point in time, and Tired went on hiatus to play poker and pickleball, meaning that it was now a question of whether one of these two remaining players could complete the entire list. It was incredible that two players managed to beat the entire list within the same day, a feat that was certainly no small task. Afterwards, Muzza took an extended break from the game, while Aibyou kept pushing forward, completing the list 2 more times, including beating levels such as I Wanna Be the Cry, Patio Light, a level around free solo difficulty, and Yoke, the top 1 during the time. The honorable mentions this time around go to Npesta and Whizkid, as Npesta is verifying the upcoming top 1, Cave of the Scarlet Sky, and Whizkid beat Abyss in a ludicrous 19 minutes, and beat Terminal Heaven Deathless. This was a level that requires slope boosting, a movement technique where by pressing the opposite direction of a slope, jumping and then moving back to the same direction of the slope, the player cube maintains normal momentum. During the month of March, a new top 1 was in the works called Claustrophobia. It's a tightly packed level where a plethora of jumps required clicking as little as possible to pass them. Consistently micro-clicking this long was a huge ask of anyone. In addition, it had this brutal staircase located near the end of the level that required coyote time jumps, but this time had to be specifically done on the last 1/80th of a second of the jump window. Any player attempting to verify it had to perform this timing 4 times in a row, and the cherry on top was that there was another 1/80th of a second timing with the very final click of the level. Aibyou started streaming attempts on this challenge, and almost every session that reached the checkpoint lasted for around 5 hours, only to come up short. But with enough grit and determination, after 40 to 50 hours and 40,000 attempts total, on his 6th attempt on the final click of the level, Aibyou managed to do this.
Yes! 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 Oh my god!
Aibyou has now cemented the fact that he was on top. He's beaten every level on the list multiple times and verified the top 1. It seemed that no one had both the skill and time to catch up to him. That was until another victor of Terminal Heaven, who only died 3 times in that level, burst onto the scene. This new player also claimed to beat Abyss in around 13 minutes, but it was unrecorded. But slowly throughout more completions, the credibility of their claim became clear. They beat Free Solo the top 1 rated level, Smelvin T Health's Deathless, and even beat Bramble Scrabble in 7 minutes. Their name was Tokei. During April, another top 1 was open to the public for verification. Null was harder than anything before it. There were jumps that required curve-like motions, and jumps that required landing precisely next to spike hitboxes. There was even this jump that required jumping off this mini block, curving around in a precise arc, hitting this corner to clip onto the block, and then right next to the mini spike. This was only a fraction of the difficulty of Null. This level was sure to be a challenge, but after enough time and 25,000 attempts, Tokei verified it.
Oh my god. Okay. Okay. It's verified. Yes.
And sure enough, it didn't take long for Aibyou to become the first victor of the level. It only took around a week, and that is where the top players of platformer mode are today. Various players such as Npesta, superdasher, NNG all have significant progress on Null, and list grinders such as panap, lutz, and adanz are closing the gap between the top players, and I can't wait to see what's in store next.